Look more at the long-term regulatory effects. So the baroreceptor reflex is a quick compensatory mechanism, but it does not work in the long-term effect of things, okay? It does not fix the problem, so to speak. So if we have bleeding out or if we have dehydration, the kidneys will eventually kick in to regulate the water balance, how much water is absorbed or filtered out into the urine, to correct this on a more long-term scale, okay? Okay, so this should be regulation, right? Regulation of blood volume. So long-term regulation, oops, no. Oh, I'm sorry, increase in blood volume. That should be increase in blood volume. So long-term regulation occurs through increasing blood volume, which is another way of saying absorbing more water in the collecting duct in the kidneys, which is keeping your blood pressure up, keeping your mean arterial pressure up. And we'll talk about some of the hormones that are involved. So epinephrine, vasopressin, and angiotensin 2. These are all hormones that we've seen before, and we'll look at them individually, okay? All right, so epinephrine, we know when it's acting as a hormone, it's doing pretty much the same thing that the sympathetic system does, okay? So I'm not gonna belabor the point of increasing contractility, increasing arterial resistance. It's bringing about the exact same response that we see for the sympathetic system. We know here that the only difference is it's being released from the adrenal medulla, so it's acting as a hormone, okay? So it's going to increase your TPR on the arterioles, it's going to increase venomotor tone, and it's going to increase heart rate and stroke volume via that autonomic response. Vasopressin and angiotensin 2, we saw these before when we looked at the extrinsic factors that regulated arterial radius. So in the face of dropping of or decreased mean arterial pressure, we increase our vasoconstriction, which is increasing total peripheral resistance of the vasculature of the arteriole, and that increases mean arterial pressure. Again, please make a note here, this does not include the brain and heart. The brain and heart do not see this vasoconstriction because they are exempt from this, okay? The other peripheral tissues vasoconstrict at the expense, the brain and heart maintain perfusion at the expense of the other tissues that do see vasoconstriction. Okay. All right, any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay, let's speak about the low pressure baroreceptors. So these are the other group of baroreceptors that I alluded to earlier. And these are in the atria of the heart and the large elastic veins, or the large systemic veins. And basically, we see this in the inferior vena cava, the superior vena cava, and they are detecting low pressure. So we sometimes call them volume baroreceptors or volume receptors, because they are detecting if there's not enough volume in the circulation. And again, there's a strategic nature to the location of these baroreceptors in the atria. Remember, the atria are the filling chambers, and in the veins where we see low pressure. So if there's a decrease in blood, there's activation of these receptors, right? If they're not being stretched adequately, they're going to trigger that firing, decrease in firing frequency, which will bring about the exact same sequence of events via as the baroreceptors. So sending a signal to the integrating centers, and the integrating centers sending a signal down to the heart, affecting heart rate, affecting contractility, affecting venomotor tone, affecting arterial resistance, okay? Those four factors that we talked about that bring about that raise in cardiac output, that raise in mean arterial pressure, okay? So the very same loop of events, but it's just brought about because of a different signal here. All right, so this table very nicely summarizes everything we kind of just talked about, the hormones that are involved, what the effect that they bring about is, and the influence on mean arterial pressure. And as you can see, most of these are increasing mean arterial pressure, excepting epinephrine. So epinephrine is the one hormone that really depends on the concentration. So at high concentrations, we see it having a vasoconstricting effect on most of our tissues, but vasodilation on skeletal and cardiac muscle. And then in low concentrations, we see that epinephrine only causes vasodilation. So remember that